Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also have concerns about adequate funding for both of these important projects. I'm also from the city of Detroit, metropolitan Detroit, and we're also concerned about creating more jobs, but we'll deal with the economic benefits of these projects later on. But Mr. Dumbacher, under a continuing resolution for FY 2013, what level of funding and what spend rate will SLS and Orion get?
Under the current understanding of what the 6-month continuing resolution will contain, we are planning to 50% of the fiscal year 12 appropriations levels. And that will be the spend rate that we are working to on SLS and Orion for the first 6 months. We do have to recognize, however, that the uncertainty in the budget and the uncertainty in the potential budget appropriations for the remainder of the fiscal year also need to be included in our planning, and we are working to address that. But in the near term, we are planning for the next 6 months to plan at 50% of the fiscal year 12 appropriations level.
Now, have you been giving any guidance regarding the CR?
What I just talked about, the FY 12 50% level is the guidance I have been given.
All right, fine. Even though we've made considerable progress in the development of both of these projects, we still have critical milestones ahead. As Congress and the administration are weighing our funding priorities, how important is the need for funding and spending stability over this next year, and what's the impact of not getting it? And I know many of you have actually alluded to this, but Mr. Dumbacher, I'd like to know your opinion.
Funding stability of any endeavor of this magnitude, launch vehicles, spacecraft, is critical to the program planning and program success. The ability to plan into the future and to understand what the future holds within some reasonable level of understanding allows us to set up our program plans to address that, and then allows us to go execute. Changes to or instability in the funding forces replan work, rework, all of that effort takes away from our ability to actually execute and get the hardware developed and build the program.
Thanks, Mr. Dumbacher. Mr. Lacefield or Mr. Chilton, you care to comment on the impact of not getting the funding that we need?
NASA has been very good at telling us what the levels are to assume, and we have planned the program to those levels. But I would like to emphasize that, with our workforce, and our workforce is our most important asset, and maintaining those critical skills across the program, we believe is really important. The funding stability is extremely important to us because that's the way that we have to look at the program as we go through the different phases, and we go from an engineering phase to a development phase to a test phase. It allows us to bring those people across those interfaces so they're available for the EM1 and EM2 missions. So having that stability allows us to keep that professional workforce, which is vital, to these high-performance programs.
Thank you.
I'd like to add that there's a bit of an unseen element in addition to cost, schedule, and skills. We've had great luck attracting talent fresh out of college. A lot of young people have joined these programs. They see it as a very attractive place to go. I have experience on other programs where we started and didn't finish and had to stop. We don't get those young people back. They begin to see this industry as unattractive or unstable. They have a strong desire to start something and finish it, take something to flight. So I would argue our STEM attraction, it's important to keep stable and make progress.
Mr. Chilton, I mean, that's an interesting, dimension to this funding issue. How important is it to actually get, our young college graduates into the space programs?
In my view,
do you have enough people right now in place in NASA to be able to, and with your company and other contractors?
I'll speak for Boeing. The Space Launch System currently is a great attractor of students out of college, and a high proportion of our program is composed of them. If you just look at a talent pipeline over a couple of decades, you have to fill the entry level and you have to put them on hard programs, or you don't have the ability to do tough stuff with senior people later. So I'd argue keeping this stable and continuing to attract those young people is important for all of us.
And probably these programs too, I mean, it's a great incentive to encourage our college students to actually go into science and to get their advanced degrees to be able to do the work that's needed here to advance SLS and Orion. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Lacefield.
Just as Mr. Chilton talked about Boeing, a third of our team I would classify as under 30. And and most of those have come to us and they're right out of school. And these kids are highly motivated, and they have a technology level, especially when we talk about advanced computing, advanced avionics, that is really vital, I think, to not only NASA, but also to the Department of Defense. So we see a lot of these technologies that these kids are involved with as playing forward to other vital programs in the U.S.
Thank you, and I yield my time. I have several questions about different aspects of these projects, but just to go back to the progress that all of you have indicated that we've made on the architecture of both Orion and SLS in the last year. In spite of that progress, what are the key challenges in maintaining that progress, and what's needed to address those challenges? Any of you, in your opinion?
Go ahead.
I think the major challenges, we've talked about one earlier, which is the budget stability and being able to plan the program out from an integrated fashion in order to arrive at the 2017 and 2021 flight dates. As is usual with this kind of work, we have technical challenges ahead of us, but they have been minimized by the choices we have made in terms of the configuration for the launch vehicle. And we are also starting to see, and Mr. Lacefield and Mr. Chilton can elaborate, we are also starting to see the typical first unit kind of problems that you have as you work through hardware with the suppliers and making sure that they're able to supply the right hardware on the right dates in order to support the flight dates. Now, we have planned margin into the schedules and other things in order to be able to adjust for much of that, but that's the typical program planning, program execution challenges that we see from an integrated level. I'll leave the rest, the further details to Mr. Lacefield and Mr. Chilton.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Mr. Dumbacher said. I think the one thing I would like to bring up is that I think our supply chain in the United States is very fragile. When we look at the EEE parts needed for, for avionics, all the electronic components for electronics, in the environments that we see, which is a radiation environment in deep space, those components are very hard to find in the United States right now. And just our program with Honeywell, Lockheed Martin, and Hamilton Sundstrand buying those components, we are seeing lead times that we have never seen before. So I would say that the supply chain is, the area that we really have to focus on. We really have to focus on the long lead times of these components, and the robustness of that supply chain isn't what it was, 10 years ago.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Lacefield, because that's very disturbing. So, number one, you've got long lead times because the components are hard to find. And then secondly, you see a fragility overall in our supply chain. Can you just, am I, characterizing the way, that you're?
So we have outsourced our composites because we have a great deal of lightweight composites on the vehicle. Approximately, I think 40% of the vehicle is composites. We have outsourced those composites across the country so that we would be able to meet the schedules of the 2014 flight. We have outsourced across all of the, electrical components to get the parts that we need by the time we need to do the vehicle checkout on the pad next March, the electrical checkout. And we are waiting on those parts to enable us to do the vehicle checkout on the pad in Florida. That's what we're waiting on. So when you start looking, and we have outsourced all of the mechanical components across the country also. So we are, with our program, we are using up a great deal of the capacity that is required in spacecraft, so that the lead times that we're seeing, we're in line with other DoD programs, and it's just something we haven't seen here recently. And I think it's something that we should all be aware of, what's happening with the supply chain in the United States on American suppliers.
I know this is likely off topic, from the focus of our hearing, but if you have any thoughts on what we can do to actually shorten those lead times and strengthen our supply chain, because it's very disturbing and have enormous impact on other industries as well. If anyone has any other comment on that, on the supply chain and what we can do to strengthen it and shorten the lead times on those components.
Well, I think this is where, when we talked about the funding stability and the stability in high-tech programs as they exist today, supporting DoD and NASA, I think we need to see some stability there for those suppliers to make it. And because they aren't seeing that stability, they're all retrenching, with their capability and capacities.
I got you. No, that's important.